How are you?
Uh, Good evening. Shelley Nicely Groff is chair of the North American Board of the Union for Reform Judaism. As such, she leads a board and an executive board of more than 200 members from across North America. The North American board works in close partnership with Rabbi Rick Jacobs, URJ president, the URJ senior leadership team, and the staff, and the Reform Movement's partners, of which Men of Reform Judaism is proud to be one, to advance the mission, the vision, and the values of the URJ. Prior to serving as chair, Shali served as URJ vice chair and led in diverse roles including in the areas of camping and youth engagement, ethics, accountability, budget oversight, congregational support, and lay leadership engagement. Along with that experience, Shelley holds a deep belief in the values of Reform Judaism and a firm commitment to the Reform movement. Shelley currently serves on the boards of Women of Reform Judaism and the Foundation for Jewish Camp, and previously served as an officer of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. An active lay teacher in her home community of Miami, Florida, Shelley also serves on the board of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation and is past chair of the Jewish Community Services of South Florida and the Jewish Community Relations Council and Temple Beth Shalom. Shelley and her husband Jonathan are the proud parents of two adult children and the very proud grandparents of um, her grandchildren. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's just thank you for having me tonight. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And it's really a special wonderful to have the opportunity to introduce our leader tonight, Rabbi Rick Jacobs. I'm not going to read his bio. You have that, so you know that he came into the role of URJ president with deep congregational experience, that he is a greatly admired leader, not just in our movement, but in the Jewish and broader communities writ large. And you already know as well that he is a passionate Zionist advocating for an Israel that is Jewish, democratic, secure, and pluralistic. Now, I will say that as Rick's lay partner, the rabbi, the person that you see tonight, that you see speaking to a congregation, to our North American board, at a convening of our movement partners like MRJ, or in Davos, Switzerland, or in the Knesset, is the same Rabbi Rick Jacobs that you experience in a one-to-one conversation with just the two of you. One of the many things that I admire about Rick is that he is who he is. He brings his vast learning and wisdom and compassion and commitment to everything that he does, be it addressing a gathering of thousands or working with just a few key leaders of a small congregation in need of support. Now, why is that so important? Because that is very important. Because, right, as we all know, we are living and working in complex, challenging times. I think that would be an understatement. I'll share that with this group that more than a few people have asked me, what is it like to be in this role at this time as we build and nurture Jewish communities of belonging when issues come at us from multiple directions and we never quite know what we're going to wake up to on any given day? What is it like, I'm asked, to not just convene, but envelop and embrace our diverse community during this time of not just different opinions and perspectives, but where people aren't always willing to even acknowledge another perspective? And I always think at that same time, what opportunity, what tremendous opportunity we have as the reform movement. The work that we do together with our movement partners like MRJ is work about which so many people care so deeply. The nurturing and lifting up of our congregations and our communities, our social justice work, our camps and NIFTY and youth engagement, Israel, Reform Zionism, what we do matters greatly. And we have a big impact. We all need community now more than ever. And nobody does all of this better than Rabbi Rick Jacobs. He sees and he can stay focused on the possible, on the vision, even while in the midst of the stickiness of much of what we have to navigate day to day in today's environment. So when I'm asked that question, what is it like to be board chair during these times? My response is always the same, that it is a real and a tremendous gift. I feel incredibly honored and blessed to get to serve in this role as lay partner to Rick with the best team of professional and lay leaders anywhere, which is the URJ. And with that, Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shelley. That was, I am particularly thankful that you did not read Rabbi Jacobs' bio, because part of that bio says that he is regularly featured in media outlets such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Haaretz, The Forward, NPR, CNN, and we can now complete the CV by adding MRJ to that. I do want to thank somebody that you won't see this evening. Jeff Agron is behind the scenes. He is our wizard of Zoom, manipulating spotlights, doing screens, etc., etc. And I also want to thank Lisa Greenberg, assistant to Rabbi Jacobs, who has been helpful in bringing this all together for us. And not to take any more of your time, Rabbi Jacobs' time, I am now going to turn it over to Rabbi Jacobs.
Thank you, Stephen. Very grateful to be able to include MRJ. People said, well, how did you come to do this webinar? And Stephen, you reached out to me and said, we've had all these important people, but you've never been on one of our MRJ webinars. I said, all you got to do is ask. I'd be honored, and I'm honored tonight to be with you. And Shelley Nicely Groff, what a just amazing partner, and what a beautiful and very touching introduction. I'm grateful to you every day. I'm looking at the list of people who are with us tonight, and I see members of my former congregation in Westchester, New York. I see members of my congregation in Brooklyn, New York. I see members of the URJ board, board alumni. I see just so many wonderful leaders of MRJ. It's really an honor to be with you. What I'd like to do tonight is, of course, Rosh Chodesh. It's the beginning of the Hebrew month of Adar, which we're told in our tradition is a month for having joy. I don't know about any of you, but we've been surely lacking in joy. So may this be a month of much joy for all of you, our people, and all people of goodness in the world. I'd like to start with a little Torah, if it's okay. The book of Exodus talks about 3 building projects of the Jewish people. The first that we know, and we tell the story at Passover Seder, is the building of pyramids. It is an impression of our people in service of building these monuments to an Egyptian leader. We're also told the second building project that's worth noting is the golden calf. Our people come together to build something for their own selfish yearning. And then towards the end of the book and beginning in this week's Parsha, Truma, we're told that the Jewish people build something so magnificent and consequential, which becomes the very focal point of their entire community. It is the Mishkan, the dwelling place of all of the holy actions that they will take together. They build it with the goodness of their heart, with the free will offerings of their being, and they together shape something quite radiant. What I want to suggest tonight is it's not just our job to build buildings, although we have plenty of beautiful buildings in our movement. It's our job to build a community of depth and purpose and inspiration. That's been the work of our movement for the past 150 plus years. It's still the work today. And this moment that we are in is extraordinarily challenging, as Shelley alluded to. It's a time where anti-Semitism isn't theoretical, it's real. The polarization tearing apart the very fabric of our communities is incredibly painful. And I would also argue that the assault on our core Jewish values and our democratic values cause us great, great concern for the well-being, not only of our community, but of the world as we know and love it. So what I want to suggest is to take you into a few key experiences that have happened in recent days, literally in recent days, as a way to magnify this moment and the power of what we do with our time, with our treasure, with our imagination, how we build that better tomorrow each and every day. I have been to a remarkable community in Jackson, Mississippi. You've all read about it. You know that on January 10th, the synagogue, one of the oldest in our Reform movement, founded in 1861, was firebombed. It was firebombed in the middle of the night by a 19-year-old who was apprehended shortly thereafter. And the library and so much of the building was incinerated. Two beautiful Sifrei Torah scrolls were completely burnt beyond recognition. There was a Holocaust scroll that actually was able to survive. And there were all of the books and the prayer books in that library, which was used for the minyan, that were absolutely charred and unusable and unrecognizable. The whole building is unusable at the moment. And what's most amazing about this community is obviously it's been overwhelmingly traumatic, but it's been a moment where the entire Reform movement, frankly, the entire Jewish people and people of goodwill everywhere have been reaching out and supporting them. One of the big dilemmas after they lost the use of their building was all of the churches in the community lined up and said, please let us host you. And another church said, no, please let us. It was such an inspired coming together of community. They have built these relationships over decades and decades. And their Friday nights are in one beautiful, the Northminster Baptist Church. Their religious school is in a different church. And some of their programming happens in yet another one. When people say, we, the Jewish community, lost after October 7th, all of our allies, I would dare anyone to say that to the people of Beth Israel in Jackson, Mississippi. They are every day supported and affirmed by remarkable allies that are still with them. It's also worth noting that this congregation is not only one of the original congregations of our URJ, then the UAC, but it also is a congregation that has stood up for civil rights. In 1967, their building was firebombed. Why? Because their Rabbi Perry Nussbaum, was instrumental in taking care of the Freedom Riders who came to Mississippi to stand up for civil rights. It is also a place that did not in any way shrink from doing that work, not then, not now, not ever. So it's a community of purpose and strength and depth. I'm going back there on this Sunday. We're going to dedicate a brand new Torah scroll. Our congregation, Gates of Prayer in Metairie, Louisiana, has arranged for a beautiful Torah scroll. We're going to have a whole day of celebration, Torah at the very heart. I'm going to just from there tell you that, of course, anti-Semitism is real. May I say that the attacker, one of the things we know is he probably could not find Israel on a map. He was not screaming free Palestine. His hatred of Jews was the old-fashioned kind, the kind of the KKK and of Christian nationalists. It doesn't mean that's the only kind, but that's the kind of hate and anti-Semitism we encountered in Jackson. In recent days, I also have been in Minneapolis with a beautiful, remarkable Reformed community. I was there with Shelley Nicely Groff. We were there for the ARJE, the Association of Reformed Jewish Educators, had their annual conference there. But as you know, Minneapolis has been the center of a huge and very painful experience with ICE. And Rabbi Jonah Pesner had been there the week prior with a remarkable legislative assistant, Tamara Upthal. And Rabbi Jonah Pesner is just one of those people. He brought the whole community together and really gave a beautiful, strong, passionate, prophetic social justice call. Our congregations have been on the front lines. Let me just say it. We believe that immigration reform and secure borders, those are all not only credible goals, they're essential goals. But what we also know is that we have a constitution, we have rule of law in this country. And what we saw with our own eyes and what the people of Minneapolis have witnessed over these past weeks has been brutal, and has been an assault not only on on certain individuals that they've been seeking out. The whole community has been affected. Shelley and I were able, because of the close relationships of Rabbi Marcy Zimmerman of Temple Israel in Minneapolis, to spend time with Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, a proud Reform Jew, I would just say loudly and clearly. Has he been a remarkable leader? He came into the position around the time of George Floyd, and he's lived as a leader in this most difficult moment. But what a backbone, what a courageous, clear-thinking, conscience-driven leader. We're very, very honored to have him in our movement. I want to also say that in recent days, I was in Davos, Switzerland. 60 heads of state were gathered, 850 CEOs of major corporations, and me. And you say, which of these is not like the other? Well, I'm not confused. I'm not the head of state. I'm honored to be the president of the URJ. I don't lead Microsoft or Amazon or one of the large corporations. But I was invited, every year they invite a rabbi to join other faith leaders at the Davos World Economic Forum to participate in the deliberations. So it's not only people who are political leaders or business leaders, but also they want people who will raise a moral voice. And we raised a very clear voice in concern about the proliferation of AI and all the good that it does, but also all the dangers. Remarkably, President Isaac Herzog was there, the president of Israel. And what he noticed, he was there with his wife, Michal, days into the Davos conference, there was nothing on the agenda to address anti-Semitism. And I know that the president and his wife, Michal, raised a voice and said, how is it possible that in this moment, with all the people gathered from so many quarters of the world, we're not going to address this? So they created, literally in less than 24 hours, a panel. I was honored to be on that panel with the First Lady of Israel, wonderful Stan Bergman, a wonderful leader formerly of AJC, who leads a Fortune 500 company, proud member of our movement. And I also was really taken by the interest people had in what is happening in North America, what's happening in Israel, what's happening around the globe regarding the Jewish people's struggle to simply be safe. And the threat from the left and the right are equally concerning. And I was very, very heartened to see that it got to the point of being considered there. You may have caught the news flash that the President of the United States was there, as was the Prime Minister of Canada. I was walking along one of the corridors on my way to one of the sessions, and I looked to my right, and there is Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. And I was ready to be able to share with him that I am proudly the leader of the URJ, which is Canada and US. I'm proud to be an American. I was especially proud to be able to say that our movement is part of his country. And I was also there when the Board of Peace was inaugurated. Tomorrow they will meet in Washington. So President Trump was there. And it was a moment that was a little bit out of body to try and imagine this was going to be the body that was going to bring peace not only to Israel, Gaza, Palestine, but also other points around the globe. Do we all have skepticism about what this board could do? Yes, of course. But I wanted to be there. I wanted to show support. I wanted to imagine that something good could come of it. And so I think in a lot of cases like this, we're asked to overcome some of our clear skepticism. I wouldn't talk about this moment without talking about the place of Israel, the struggle that many people are having to both understand what's happening. You may know that the Jewish Federations of North America released a study about a week or 10 days ago that found some pretty surprising conclusions about what is actually going on, not with what's happening, but what people understand key words to be. Turns out that 1/3 of American Jews say they are Zionists, only 1/3. Now, that would be a really stellar statistic, but 9 out of 10 in their survey said they support Israel as a independent and democratic country. So the overwhelming majority of Jews support the state of Israel. but only a third will use the word Zionist to describe that commitment. So clearly there are different interpretations of what it means. A sliver of people identify themselves as anti-Zionists, about 14%. Another small percentage said that they were non-Zionists. What's clear is there's no agreement what it means to be Zionist. It's not even clear what it means to be anti-Zionist. There's a lot of confusion. It's critical for our movement to stand tall. We are the largest Zionist movement in not only North America, but around the globe. We're very proud of that. Does that mean we agree with everything that the state of Israel has ever done? No. To be a proud American doesn't mean you agree with everything the United States is doing now or did in the previous administration. To be a proud Canadian doesn't mean you agree with everything the Canadian government does. It means that you feel a deep commitment to the project of that country, to the values that undergird it, as we do with Israel. And so at this moment, there is still fighting in Gaza. There is not a full-fledged peace. And there's still concern that there will be such resolution. Obviously, there's still concern about Iran's capabilities. What I want to say is our movement doesn't watch from the bleachers. We are in there deeply committed, working with our Israel movement. And one doesn't have to like the government of Israel to love Israel. One does not have to agree with every policy decision of the Knesset to have a deep sense that the future of the Jewish people needs there to be a strong Israel, an Israel that also is reflective of our core Jewish values. We've been that movement and we continue to be that movement. And we also foster that there's learning. There are people who are trying to discover what it means to feel connected. We lead programs. We're led brilliantly by Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who's the vice president for Reform Zionism and Israel, and Rabbi Lindsay Danziger, who helped to lead our World Zionist Congress elections. We turned out the largest group, and we showed up in Jerusalem this past fall and affirmed our deep connection to the land, the people, the values, and we also raised a voice of critique along with other delegates from all around the world. I say all that just to kind of get us into the feeling of what this moment is about. What I'd like to do is do something that we rabbis sometimes do, but not always. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to also make a space, because what we'd love to have happen is for there to be a chance for there to be dialogue and question and answers. So I know that, Stephen, if you'll help us in that, it'll be really, really wonderful. And frankly, this is an opportunity to hear from you. I hope to be able to offer answers that will be stimulating, in some cases satisfying, but hopefully also offered in the spirit that I know they will be asked.
Thank you. One of my first questions, and it's something that came up a few times in the registration form where there was a space for registrants to inquire. Do you ever sleep?
It's such a good question. The truth is, I don't actually sleep a lot. That's been either a blessing or a curse. I'm not sure which one, but it is the truth. And I get to travel endlessly. When people sometimes ask me in the presence of my wife, they say, "Oh, where do you live, Rick?" And I say, "New York City." And my wife gives an elbow and says, "No, really, Delta Airlines." I travel a lot. Why? Because our movement is spread out across North America and across the globe. You can't lead from a Zoom screen alone. You have to actually show up in communities, meet the communities, hear their concerns, see the things that they're building. So, sleep will be for whatever it is in the next life, but it's not so much a part of this one.
Okay, so in all seriousness, I think there were a few sort of major themes that came out in your remarks. Government actions, particularly those from the current administration, how leaders and communities are responding, questions about religious freedom and direct attention. We also have questions about internal movement challenges, and of course, the oldest hate, anti-Semitism. So what I'd kind of like to begin with is navigating dual commitments. Reform Jews, or well, Jews in general, is sometimes portrayed with the trope of dual loyalties, and the awareness and the challenges of the anti-Semitism that are inherent in that. How do you respond to those questions of dual loyalties? How do our Zoom folks respond to that?
I appreciate that question, Stephen. And the truth is, it's age old. It's not a brand new expression of anti-Jewish hate. And the idea that one could love the state of Israel, feel a deep kinship, and also be at the very same time a very proud American does not in any way insinuate dual loyalty. I know plenty of people whose family are from, you name, Italy, UK, France, South America, Argentina. The idea that automatically they're conflicted about where their loyalties lie. I think that is one of those, just falsehoods that gets repeated and repeated. It's also been mentioned quite a bit in the last 10 years. And it's particularly hurtful because I think right now there's a lot of question about, the anti-Jewish hatred. Is it separate from all the other forms of hatred and racism that are coursing through our community? Many of us think that anti-Semitism is sadly one of the earliest and probably most virulent forms of racism. And it also is connected to the others, not because everyone is like the Jews, but what usually begins with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. And I think that we as a community have to stand strong, but I also think we learned this from the folks in Jackson, Mississippi. Stephen, they are so proud. They are not cowering and hesitant to stand as Jews and even wear Jewish symbols. And I see that also in a moment where there is danger. People are leaning into the beauty, the depth, and the substance of being Jewish, and not to be cavalier about danger, but this is a moment for us to stand tall, to stand proud, and stand together so that we can, face the future, but build that better future together.
Okay, so then let's touch upon internal conflicts. I often have the feeling, and I've heard it from many different people, that Reform Jews are looked upon as a block, that we all vote in a certain manner, and we know that's not true. What do we do to combat that? How do we welcome and talk to those who perhaps I can say not in the majority, but are also part of our movement?
Well, I think what we know, all of us who are part of this movement, is we are very diverse. And some of that diversity is on the sort of superficial level. We are, first of all, we're not geographically in one area. We're north, south, east, west. We are small, medium, large. We are, generations of Reform Jews and brand new newcomers. We are liberal in our politics and conservative in our politics. We are Jews of color and Jews of all hues. We are people who are very, very progressive on Zionism, and we are people who are very conservative and traditional. So the key, I think, in this moment, which is not actually modeled very well in most political circles, is how do we live in that diversity? And from a place of respect and understanding, not just toleration. Our congregations are working overtime to make sure that everyone feels welcome. But the most critical thing I think we are trying to really get our muscles in shape is to be able to have serious, respectful arguments, whether they're about issues of ritual practice, issues of our commitments to Israel. It may be our understanding of what the nature of God is. How do we find ways to be aware of our differences, not to demonize those differences, but actually to draw strength from that? That's not something that's being modeled very well in the United States Congress. I don't even think it's being modeled so well in the Canadian Parliament. So this is something I hope our congregations and our movement in general can do. We don't yet succeed in having everyone feel that sense of belonging. It just needs to be said. There are people who hear that we advertise that we're all warm and welcoming, and then they have an experience where they feel a bit alien. So there's work to be done, but I also think that in our Jewish community, there are people who are Orthodox and people who are conservative, people who are Yiddish socialists, people who are none of the above. And I think one of the things that has happened in the post October 7th world for us as a people is I think we've actually come to appreciate more the differences can be without having it be divisive. But it's a challenge, and I know that sometimes you think of Passover Seder and our families gather, and I know this year will be the same, where some families say we can't actually all generations of our families gather because we have so many disagreements about domestic politics, about international politics, about core values, what it means to be Jewish. So it's pretty hard to be a Jewish community in this moment, but I will underscore that it's even more important for us to be that aspiring Jewish community today in the face of all these external and internal challenges.
Well, that presents a perfect segue. And for those of you listening in, we did not plan this in advance, but generational changes. What are they affecting our policy advocacy? How do we see the voting patterns or engagement and international issues? And of course, the reactions to the government in Israel.
So it is a phenomenon, not just within the Jewish community or certainly not within the Reform. It's a pretty generational shift that we're experiencing. I had the privilege this past summer, along with Rabbi David Saperstein, to meet with Ambassador Huckabee in Jerusalem at the embassy. And I asked him, because he is, after all, a remarkable evangelical leader. I said, Ambassador Huckabee, all of the demographic studies say that the evangelical next generation are less committed to Israel than their parents and grandparents. It's not, therefore, only a Jewish phenomenon. It's not just within the mainline Protestant. I said, what accounts for that? And he shared that, frankly, he's perplexed by it. He sees it. He agrees that it's a phenomenon. And I think we see, probably all of us in our own experience, that we are probably different than our parents. Some of us had to break away. I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, and the issues of the Vietnam War and other things that were going on. There is always a need for a next generation to kind of distinguish itself. I think this is a moment where there's a lot of struggle. We also have a generation that, frankly, is deeply harmed by social media and by the experience of the global pandemic. I had a chance to be with Jonathan Haidt in Davos, proud Reform Jew, the author of several really profound books. His most recent is The Anxious Generation, studying the impact of social media on young adults and how they see the world, how they relate to others. So I think that we're seeing really some big shifts in society, not only generationally. And I think that if I could just hone in a little bit more on the question, we're seeing some really big shifts around Israel. And we see younger Jews who grew up in a very different time vis-a-vis Israel. I grew up, in the aftermath of the Six-Day War and the 73 War. Israel was a different country. Its standing around the world was one of deep and, frankly, universal respect. Kids today who grew up, they're in their teens or their 20s or even their early 30s, they've grown up in the Intifada Israel. They've grown up in the world where there's a very rightward shift in Israel's governments, and they're trying to see their own values reflected. So we work very hard. We take lots of young people to Israel. We're very proud of that. We bring Israelis to our summer camps, to our congregations, and to our youth movement. So we're trying to build those bridges so the young people can experience and test their own issues. I've shared this, I'll share it too with you. It was a couple of years ago, right before the summer, I was meeting with a group of our Israelis who were coming to work in our summer camps. We call them shlichim, emissaries of the Jewish agency. And one Israeli shaliach who was still wearing his IDF uniform pulled me aside, took me off away from the group, and said, Rabbi Jacobs, I'm afraid to come to camp this summer. And I said, excuse me, but I just have to comment. You told me a moment ago that you've just spent 4.5 months in Gaza. You're still wearing your IDF uniform. What in the world could you be afraid of in our summer camps? You know, maybe the food's not going to be good. Maybe the mattress will be, uncomfortable. He said, no, I'm afraid of serving with a co-counselor who's just left a very liberal American college. And I'm afraid of some of the harsh things that we might say to one another. I said, well, you know what? That is our responsibility. We're working very, very hard so that you can share your experience with that college student, Reform Jew. And I also want that college student to share his or her experience with you, right? It's a two-way street. We've had very, very positive experiences building a trusting environment where we can actually have hard conversations. I think young people expect to be able to ask those hard questions, not to be told, here's what you must believe, here's what you must think. So for us, in our congregations, in our youth movement this year at our Nifty Collab at Green Family Camp in Texas, we had our teen leaders do our Israel learning program on that Sunday afternoon of the program. And frankly, they were able to foster an experience of trust with their peers. We've got to be able to not just tolerate the next generation as they ask these questions. Many of our generations and our parents' generations are asking similar questions. If we're going to make a rock solid movement commitment, it's got to be based on learning, of openness and honesty. We've got a very clear stake in the ground. We are a Zionist movement. We are liberal Zionists. We love Israel. We often disagree with statements by the government. We're very troubled by the proliferation of violence in the West Bank, which is endangering the lives of IDF soldiers and others. So if we're going to be engaged, we got to be fully engaged. And that isn't a simple exercise, but I think our movement is doing it with a very clear mind and a very, very deliberate strategy.
So our movement, how are we addressing social media? Probably one of the greatest influences on our children, if I can say that. We didn't have that in the 60s. We didn't have news that traveled around the world at the speed of sound. So what are we putting forth with social media to try and win the hearts and minds?
Well, let's just first of all be aware of the dangers of social media, particularly on young minds. You're seeing a movement in many schools across not only North America, but even in Europe, to make schools screen-free. Our summer camps are screen-free. We really have to allow young people to develop their own awareness. It is potentially destructive of social dynamics. So it's sometimes thought of as a powerful tool to get word out about, different issues. It is, but it also is potentially the thing that inhibits social development and even cognitive development, as Jonathan Haidt has written very eloquently. So I think that social media needs to be contained and controlled. I know that some of the tech gurus who were at the Davos conference didn't want to hear that. They kind of feel that, well, you know what, we can regulate our own, platforms. And the truth is they haven't. And I would also say that what we've learned with the power and danger of social media is how much more dangerous with AI. AI isn't simply a tool. It's going to change everything about human society. So I think that we're becoming, appropriately skeptical when people say that, giving a screen, an iPhone to a 8-year-old or a 9-year-old is a good idea. We actually have learned the hard way because there wasn't really regulation. So I think that as a movement, we do obviously have regular communication on social media, but we also want to be very clear that we learn how to be face-to-face as community. We learn how to make sure that everything we do isn't mediated by some piece of technology that actually could be against core values that we have been upholding for millennia. So social media is powerful. It is capable of doing much good, and unchecked, it can actually cause significant harm, as we have witnessed.
I'd like to follow up on that a little bit, and generational politics. Do you see that the upcoming generation, our children, are moving in a different direction with American politicians? Is this something that we can quantify, or do we want to quantify?
I actually don't think there is a uniform one-way shift that we can see in terms of the politics of young people. I think the assumption is young equals very progressive. I'm aware and have been in dialogue with plenty of our young people who would clearly identify as conservative. I think we have to both see the uniqueness of where people are. There are certainly pockets of very progressive young people. There may be a tendency in every generation for some of the young people to take on some of the new challenges to the status quo. But I think that we have a generation that is also trying to figure out how to balance their lives. I know in our own URJ and in our lay leadership, we have young people who have very different perspectives. They've grown up in a different world. And I think that we should not try to categorize young people. We should try to get to know them. Sometimes I always make the mistake in the office, and say, where's the youngest person? Can the youngest person in the office come into my office and solve this technological problem? Like every young person is fluent in every bit of technology. I have my own 3 kids, my grandson. The truth is they're usually natives of the digital world, but it doesn't mean that's the sum total of, what they may have knowledge greater than our own. But I think that, we're seeing very big political shifts. If I could just dwell for a moment on the United States, we're US and Canada, but for the moment, the United States. I don't know one person who hasn't been unhappy with the US government in the past 10 years. It may be a different part of those 10 years that they were unhappy, but almost everyone I know has been unhappy. Either they're unhappy now or they were unhappy 3 years ago. I think learning how to be with people who actually think very differently politically is incredibly challenging. And it feels that for many of us, it feels existential. So I think how we're figuring out how to navigate those particular differences that get brought into the synagogue. A rabbi gives a sermon that addresses a social issue, and immediately there's a feeling that this is automatically a step into partisan politics. We've got to be able to talk about the most urgent moral issues, whether those issues are climate change, immigration, gender, gender segregation in certain settings. We've got to be able to have a values clear conversation. And I think in America, we have become immobilized in being able to talk through and work through some of the most basic challenges facing our country. I know Canada has its own version. I see it obviously in struggles around Europe and with different parts of the globe. I really think that this is a moment where we have to learn new skills and have to really develop those new muscles. I hope that we also, by radiating some of that outside of our synagogue, people say we should only stay inside our synagogues, talk to the Jewish community. No, we have to be participants in the larger democracy. There is a very flawed notion that by fighting anti-Semitism, by weakening democracy and the rule of law and all kinds of very key protections, due process, that we're going to keep Jews safe. I know over time the Jews have been kept safest in our democracies where those fundamental protections have been essential. So we're also needing to be better citizens and better committed not only to Jewish safety, but Jewish safety isn't only in one narrow circle. It involves the safety of many others who are also protected by that democracy. And I think that our movement has been ready and able to do that. It doesn't mean we have uniform agreement in our movement about every one of those stances, but we debate, we discuss, and we decide. And when we do, we stand up as we did in Minneapolis, and people are ready if they have to stand up again in Chicago or Los Angeles or wherever we have those challenges. I think that's one of the things that we can offer and bring to the larger society, and I'm proud that that's one of the things we do.
And to that, I would say amen. I believe it was Ambassador Rabbi David Saperstein, although it may have been Rabbi Pesner, who, when talking about this Civil Rights Act of, I believe it was 1964, the expression was the Genesis was on the streets of Selma, but the words were put down at the RAC office in Washington. So where are we with civil rights, and how do we tie civil rights into anti-Semitism? In particular, there are some who say that Reverend Jackson, who just passed away, had some anti-Semitism, and how are we dealing with that as an overarching issue?
Thank you for that question. I think first of all, we as a Reform movement put out a statement to remember Jesse Jackson, who was not a perfect, embodiment of all the values we hold dear, but was a remarkable leader, also owned his own anti-Semitism and some of his early embrace of kind of more radical Palestinian politics. He was a remarkable leader, and we don't have to be completely aligned with any group to be able to stand with them in very key ways. This, to me, is one of the most essential teachings of this moment. If we have to only relate to groups that are just like us, we'll be alone, and we won't even be, in big Jewish groups. So I think we're really navigating a moment. Can I just remember one of the most powerful moments with Jesse Jackson and Rabbi Jonah Pesner and Reverend William Barber? It was the launch of the Poor People's Campaign on the Mall in Washington. I'll never forget. And Reverend Barber spoke first, as he always should, because he's amazing. And then Rabbi Jonah Pesner stepped to the microphone and was just warming up. I could just see Jonah, ready to really give his message. And as he opened his mouth to say even one word, there were shouts from the crowd from a group called Code Pink, a very anti-Israel group, and they were shouting him down to the point where it was hard to hear. And Bishop Barber took the microphone. Jesse Jackson was standing right there. Bishop Barber took the microphone and said, "Excuse me, we've come together today to stand as people of faith, to stand up for the poor and working class of this country. We will not be divided by hate." The crowd was silenced. And Jesse Jackson was on one side, Bishop Barber on the other, Jonah in the middle. And then Jonah gave his talk without a single interruption. Now, you could say, should Rabbi Pesner or I or any of us go places where it's not completely aligned and everyone is going to stand with us? We have allies. Reverend Barber has been a fantastic ally from October 8th, October 6th, and today. And there are many others who have been that way. And frankly, some of the liberal Protestant groups haven't been perfect. I was with the evangelical Lutherans this past summer. They have been remarkable in standing up against anti-Judaism in the Lutheran Church. So we can't be purists, and we can't expect absolute unanimity. and we have to work in coalitions. But I would just go back to the experience of Jackson, Mississippi. The allies are strong. Think about Or Shalom in Chicago, Rabbi Ari Margolis. There was anti-Semitic hate in the back wall of the synagogue. Rabbi Margolis invited all of his interfaith leader colleagues to come to synagogue that Friday night. And the synagogue was filled to overflowing, including the imam, with whom there had been tension around the kind of post-October 7th. But he showed up because it was a moment of solidarity. Our security will not be created only by more cameras, more security guards. We need those. We need more funding from the US government for nonprofit security grants. But we also need that deep relationship with other groups who will stand with us and stand for us and be allies in this fight for the America that we need. Civil rights is one of the ways we assure that those rights will be protected. If they're not going to be protected for African Americans, they're not going to be protected for Jews and for others. So this is core to our social justice agenda. It was in 1964 and 1965 with the Voting Rights and the Civil Rights Act, both of which have been called into great question at the peril of our democracy. So there's much work to do. We should be proud of our movement's long commitment. Rabbi Saperstein is one of the treasures of the American Jewish community and of our Reform movement, but he can't do it alone. Rabbi Pesner can't do it alone. None of us can do it alone, but together, together we can do this work, and we will.
Yes. If anybody that's listening is not familiar with Reverend Barber, I encourage you to Google search. Truly, I think a person we can actually describe as a force of nature. He is just a tzaddik. He's one of the most influential, engaging, and menschkeit people I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. I want to switch up a little bit with the time that's left to us. I want to discuss internal challenges for the URJ. It's no secret with changing demographics that there are mergers, that people are moving, et cetera, financial pressures. How are we as a movement responding to those type of challenges?
So there are shifts demographically. There are also geographic shifts. I remember being in the Rust Belt. I was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, early in my tenure. And people took me on a drive through the community and said, these were the steel mills. These were the congregations that were absolutely filled to overflowing. That's not going to actually happen because we declare that these congregations should find new members. Some of those shifts have happened. There have been migrations. We've seen mergers, sometimes of very large congregations. In Cleveland, Ohio, two of our most storied congregations, Fairmont Temple and the Temple, Tiferet Israel, joined together and created a new name. They're called Mishkan Or, and it's a really noble thing. These were two strong, separate congregations that realized they could actually offer more to their members and to the wider community by bringing together the two congregations. We have some mergers that happen in small communities where the Jewish community just has really evaporated. We've seen mergers between Reform and conservative congregations. I was in Iowa City, and the congregation there is Reform and conservative. Friday night is Mishkan Tefillah. Saturday morning is the conservative. They have a Reform rabbi because if they had a conservative rabbi, half the congregation would not be thought of as Jewish because they don't accept patrilineal descent. So we're seeing these changes. We're also seeing new modalities of people gathering together for prayer or for social justice, but not always in a formal structure called a congregation. This is a moment where we want more people to experience Judaism and not be as concerned with what are the institutional structures. And we're seeing people, I'll just give you another example, Stephen, in our camps, we used to have 95% of our campers came from congregations. Today, the number in some of our camps is probably, 70%, which means that for some families, sending their child to Jewish summer camp is their first commitment they've made to another Jewish institution. So we're seeing a different ecosystem of Jewish life. We can moan that fact, or we can figure out how to strive to be strong within it. That the second is our strategy. And we're seeing also great cooperation among the conservative reform, reconstructing Judaism, and even the Orthodox. I was in Israel this summer with a conference of presidents. We were in President Herzog's home, and he was in the middle of a talk, and he stopped the talk, and he saw me sitting next to the head of the Orthodox Union, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, and he stopped and he said, "Look at this, everyone. The head of the Reform movement is sitting next to the head of the Orthodox Union." And I said, "Mr. President, with all due respect, there's nothing unusual about this. He's my friend. He's actually my chavruta, my study partner. There's nothing unusual about the two of us sitting next to each other. But I can tell you in the state of Israel today, it is unimaginable that an Orthodox leader would sit with a Reform rabbi and have an ongoing relationship." And I said, my prayer for the state of Israel is that in very short order, this will no longer be a news flash to you or to anyone, but this will become commonplace. But I'm afraid we're very, very far from that. And I think that the culture of difference is difficult. But in America, in Canada, we do much better with pluralism internally with the Jewish people. And I think we've got to also share more of that with the state of Israel. They have many things to share with us that bless us, but they have got to be learning some of the things we've figured out here. By the way, when you take away political power, all religious groups have the same level playing field. That would be a welcome addition in Israel as well. Can I just say that I've seen some questions in the Q&A, and I don't want people to think that we're ignoring them, because I know, Stephen, that's not your thought. Can I just grab a couple of these questions so that people can know that we're paying attention?
Please.
So David Kirshen asked, did you talk to the Canadian Prime Minister about being left out of the peace board? I didn't. I actually don't think he feels terrible about it. And given his speech at Davos, I don't think he'll be soon welcomed into the peace board, which I think is a real shame. The pain I'm hearing from our Canadian, I see Mark Anshin, by the way, Mark, mazel tov on becoming a Zaidi, or a Saba, as I like my grandson to call me. I don't think our Canadians right now feel a great affinity to the United States. And that causes us in the Reform movement great pain. And I think a lot of Americans feel that pain as well. I see Richard Corellis has asked two questions. He said, I expected to hear about the Jewish response to the oppression of immigrants and US citizens by this government. Richard, that was the whole story I told about Minneapolis, having been there and seen our community's stance against the tactics of ICE, not the project of creating a more sensible and frankly effective immigration system, but the tactics of demonizing immigrants when many of us can tell our own immigrant stories is anathema to our movement. So thank you for asking the question. It is important to all of us. I also see Rob asked, do you see any group of Palestinians that are willing and able to form a government that will work with Israel? Rob, I just would say that there is certainly a feeling after the attack of October 7th that there will never be a Palestinian state. There will never be Palestinians we can work with. I actually do not believe that. I know many, many Israelis do not believe that. We're all eyes wide open. October 7th is still sending shudders through us. But there are people with whom we can actually work with. And I think we see a group, Omdim B'Yachad in Israel, working together. I know Mark Anshin has been part of a wonderful group that's been working with Palestinians, bringing them to get medical treatment. There's a lot of tension for sure. It's Ramadan. It's a time where I think we're all very nervous about the tension, especially during the month of Ramadan. But we do not have the luxury of saying there cannot be peace. There will never be partners for peace. I reject that. If I may I share a kind of a concluding story about having a little bit or a lot of hope. I am old enough to have been a junior at Hebrew University a couple of years after the 73 war. My roommates on Mount Scopus were all Israeli law students. They had all fought in the 73 war. Not one of them ever mentioned that there would ever be peace, that there could even be an imagination for such a time. And it just was literally off the table. And these were remarkable young men. I love these gentlemen. But their experience was one where they could not imagine the Egyptian and Syrian armies that attacked them so brutally that there could ever be peace. And then 2 years later, I am a first-year rabbinical student living in Jerusalem when the man who led the Egyptian war against Israel, named Anwar Sadat, decided to come to Jerusalem. We were, first-year students. We were going to class every day, and then the world changed, and he showed up. Our arch enemy yesterday showed up in Jerusalem, and the unthinkable began to happen. Now, my landlady was somebody who hated Arabs, all Arabs. And she would tell anyone who would listen, I hate Arabs. And so on the day that he was going to travel from the King David Hotel to the Knesset in his motorcade, we lined the streets and they were giving out little flags, little Egyptian flags and little Israeli flags, hoping that when Anwar Sadat passed by, he would see a cheering and a very supportive community in Jerusalem. Well, we were all right along the road, and I looked over, and there's my landlady. I'm thinking, oh, please don't stand on the front lines. Sadat's going to go by you. He's going to take one look at you, and he's going to be crestfallen that there's not going to be peace. So I catch her eye. She looks over, and I see she's got the Israeli flag. She's waving, and I look a little closer. She's got the Egyptian flag in the other hand, and she's waving the Egyptian flag. So I catch her eye, and I went. And she looks back at me and went, in one day, this woman went from being absolutely like my roommates, there will never be peace, there's never anyone. Someone like Sadat, who was so brutal in leading the attack against Israel, how could such a person ever be a instrument of peace? I say that to you not because I'm naive. I know how unbelievably difficult peace will be, coexistence will be, but I'm also deeply committed. And I know that many people, as I look down this list of participants tonight, also have a deep belief that someday, it's not going to be this year, it's not going to be next year, it may not be for decades, but there must be, and there will be the possibility that we will wave flags and we will stand together and we will figure out how to stop soaking this land with the blood of our people and all those who dwell in the beautiful land of Israel. So to me, we have to always end. Our tradition says you should end study with a nechemta, something that's redemptive, something that gives people hope, not a superficial hope, but a hope that's genuine. And I hold that hope. And I hope that all of us, as we love and support Israel, know that she needs to be able to defend herself and live in a very dangerous neighborhood. That is for sure. But let's not believe those people who say never, never, never could there be a different present and tomorrow. I think our tradition commands us to have that belief. But more than that, if I could zero back to the parasha as I began, we build the Mishkan this week, over the next few weeks, actually. We are building a different world. It's not just a praying place. It's the place for our community to dwell. It's where our values will be lived. It's where we'll be able to coexist with the heart and soul of our ancestors and all those who've been standing for Jewish tradition all these decades and millennia. I think that is what we're here to do. We're to build not a pyramid, not a golden calf, but a better tomorrow, to do it with our hands, our hearts, and our heads. I thank you, Stephen. I thank MRJ. Larry, thank you for helping to lead us. Thank you to my amazing sacred partner, Shelley Nicely Groff. Thank you to all those who logged on tonight. I apologize if your question wasn't answered to the fulfillment, but stay in it with us. We've got a lot of work to be done. We're not going to do it all tonight, but together we will not only do this work, we will shape that better tomorrow. We will build that Mishkan together.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to ask, there she is, Shelley, to come back and wrap us up with some really exciting news, with something I've been looking forward to for many years. So, Shelley?
Thank you, Steve. And Jeff, do we have the slide? Here it comes. So yes, stay in it with us, please. Biennial is back. We hope that you will join us this December, the 10th through the 13th in Philadelphia for Biennial 2026. It will be joyful. We are going to have those bold conversations. We are going to learn together, and Shabbat at Biennial. We are going to experience the spiritual renewal together, and we will learn from and develop powerful insights. So please join us. I will look forward to seeing you there. You can scan that QR code and you can get on our list to get updates by email when they come out. Registration will be opening soon. I looked on the list. I think a number of you have pre-registered. That is great. But we are very excited about this, and I just hope to see all of you there for what's going to be a very impactful and meaningful experience together. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you all. Thank you, Rabbi. And hope to see you all there. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.